Hi, I'm firearms attorney Gilbert Ambler, and today we are going to talk about FFL related issues. Specifically, we are going to be talking about home-based FFLs and some tips for them, especially in light of the recent attack on FFLs that the Biden administration has been conducting. And what I'm talking about here is really in relation to two articles, both of which broke on Ammo Land this week. The first about an Oklahoma-based FFL that was raided after he talked to the ATF, and during that raid, the ATF removed from his home roughly 50 personally owned firearms that were not business firearms. His own personal firearms were confiscated by the ATF in that. And I want to talk about that article. I also want to talk about the new Gun Owners of America lawsuit against the ATF. This is Morehouse 2, the second Morehouse lawsuit. We're going to talk about that complaint and what Gun Owners of America is alleging in that complaint and why it is so important for all Americans and all FFLs across the country. Before we dive into this subject, if you have not yet subscribed, go ahead, hit subscribe for us, like this, comment, share your thoughts. That way you and your friends can keep getting this important Second Amendment related content. Let's start by talking about home-based FFLs, because I find so many people either are thinking about obtaining a home-based FFL or have obtained one, but still don't really understand what rights the ATF has and what the ATF can do. And I am certainly not going to cover all of the things that are important for those with an FFL. There's a tremendous amount of information that we think FFLs need to understand. If you're interested in obtaining an FFL, that is something that you should contact a credible lawyer with, somebody who has experience, to talk through that process and things you should be thinking about. If you currently have an FFL, same thing. There's no substitute for good counsel on this stuff. Get good advice. Make sure you've got good advisors in place. But here are some quick tips and some things that I think FFLs should be thinking about. And the reason we are talking about this is because if you have an FFL, you have given the ATF the authority to conduct an administrative inspection of your licensed premises on a frequency of no more than once a year. Okay, so by obtaining an FFL, the ATF can come in and inspect the location where business is taking place no more than once a year. If they want to come more frequently than once a year, they will need to come back with a warrant. Now, this is especially important for home-based FFLs because there are a lot of home-based FFLs in this country, and those folks need to worry what is going to be inspected during an administrative inspection. And I think because of the administrative inspection for these folks, a myth has started going around that if you have an FFL, you have waived all of your Fourth Amendment rights and the ATF can come in at any time and conduct a warrantless search. That is not true. That being said, if you are thinking about applying for a home-based FFL, and I'm going to give you a free tip right now. This is something that I often help customers do, but help clients do when they're forming an FFL. But the free tip is this. I would obtain an LLC first, okay, because you want to have an LLC to route your FFL through. I would then lease a portion of my home to that LLC. I would actually execute a lease for the business that lays out a specific portion of the home where I intend to conduct business. Then when I apply, when I do my Form 7 and apply to the ATF for my FFL, I will apply through my business and I will provide them a copy of the lease along with a blueprint drawing of the home. I'm going to actually submit a blueprint as an exhibit with my Form 7 that shows exactly where the licensed premises is. And we do this for a couple of reasons. A, we do this because it helps home-based FFLs keep themselves out of trouble. The reason this helps keep home-based FFLs out of trouble is because every business firearm needs to be in the FFL's bound book, in the book that describes the acquisition and disposition of all firearms that are in business inventory. The concern here is if they search the business premises and they find guns that are not in the bound book, that would support violations to the ATF. And so your home-based firearms, remember we talked about that article on Ammo Land where the home-based FFL was raided, over 50 of his personal guns were taken. We want to make sure that it is clearly designated which guns are personal firearms and which guns are business firearms. And by doing this, we designate a specific portion of your home as the business. We lease that portion of the home to the business, Business firearms stay in that portion, personal firearms stay outside of that portion. And so not only does this help protect you from violations, it also helps protect you from the ATF going through the rest of your house when they conduct an administrative inspection and going through your gun safe that's in your bedroom and your closet, because that is outside of the licensed premises. They don't have the authority to search that area absent obtaining a warrant for it. So tip number one, clearly designate the licensed premises. Number two is be very, very careful with your business hours, because a lot of people get tempted when they do a Form 7, when they open up as an FFL, to put a lot of hours on that they claim they're going to be open. The concern with this is the ATF then thinks they can stop by during business hours to conduct that administrative inspection, and they can stop by unannounced, and if you deny them the ability to conduct the inspection when they drop by, if it is during business hours, that would be a revocable offense. And so narrowing the business hours as much as possible is important, because we want very, very narrow business hours so that they can't stop by any night of the week because you claimed you were open every weeknight. That's tip number two that I'm going to give you for free right now if you're thinking about a home-based FFL. Tip number three is if you already have a home-based FFL, nothing stops you from applying for a new FFL. So if you're concerned because maybe there were some deficiencies in how you set up your FFL initially, you can start a new business, obtain a new FFL, and then surrender the old one. That would help you address some of these issues if you did not address them during your initial FFL application. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the other Ammo Land article that drew my attention this week. This was the GOA and Morehouse lawsuit against the ATF with respect to their zero tolerance policy. And what this policy is it's a Biden-era initiative where they said, we are going to revoke more and more gun stores. When we inspect gun stores and we find violations, we are going to consider more and more of those violations to be willful offenses, which subject the FFL to revocation. Now, the interesting thing here is that Gun Owners of America is citing an administrative action policy that expands how they define willful violations. It used to be three ways that the ATF thought they could establish willfulness, and those included things like the FFL admitting that they knew that a violation had occurred, knowing that there was a regulation that they should have followed and that they willfully violated that. If they were to admit it, for example, that would have been one of the ways ATF could have proved a willful violation. They have expanded this, and one of the ways that they have expanded this is to say, if ATF has ever supplied you information on this subject and you mess something up, then we could consider that a willful violation. And this is because when you first obtain an FFL, the ATF is going to hand you literally hundreds of pages of regulations, go over them with you in maybe a 2-hour time period. And these are intensive laws that not only does the ATF sometimes get mixed up, but lawyers get mixed up at times. They're going to give them to you over the course of 2 hours. At the end of those 2 hours, they're going to have you sign off saying you understand all 200 plus pages of regulations that you were handed. And then 5, 10, even 15 years later, if you mess something up, they will turn back to that signature and say that signature proves you knew the regulation was in place and therefore it was willful that you violated it. So of course, this is a very, very difficult standard to meet, especially when the ATF is taking the position that even minor paperwork errors can constitute a willful violation. And essentially what the ATF has said on this point is that if you have a history of doing things correctly and then you mess something up, it shows that you know how it should have been done and therefore you were willful in messing it up. Alternatively, the ATF says if you never do anything right, it shows you don't care and therefore that would be willful. And if there's no history that's relevant at all, ATF says, well, even one instance of a failure can constitute a willful violation. Therefore, all paths ultimately lead to a route where the ATF could revoke an FFL for virtually any violations that they're finding. Final point I want to make, you should go read the complaint. Again, you could find it on Ammo Land. It's GOA and Morehouse versus the ATF. And the interesting thing about Morehouse was the plaintiff that partnered with Gun Owners of America in the lawsuit against the ATF's final rule on frames or receivers. So is some question as to whether the subsequent inspection and then revocation of the Morehouse FFL is in fact a retaliation for them supporting gun owners of America in that lawsuit. Go read the filings, because not only are they interesting, they're actually at times kind of humorous, because Gun Owners of America cites multiple violations that the ATF themselves has had when handling firearms. And very competent attorneys handling the case. Rob Olson, Steve Stambolia, and John Harris out of Nashville, Tennessee, all excellent attorneys, very, very knowledgeable on firearms law and FFL law. I'm excited to see where this suit goes. If you enjoyed this content, go ahead, hit subscribe for us, like this, share it. Until next time.